TellyCast, the TV industry news review.
Hi, I'm Justin Crosby, and welcome to another TellyCast. On this week's show, my guests are MIPCOM and MIP Junior boss Lucy Smith, with all the latest news on next month's mother of all content markets in Cannes. And Lucas Green, Global Head of Content Operations at Banijay, talks Survivor on the mega format's 25th anniversary. It's all coming up on this week's TellyCast. My first guest on this week's show is Director of MIPCOM and MIP Junior, Lucy Smith. Welcome back to TellyCast, Lucy. How are you?
Hello, Justin. Thank you for having me back on TellyCast. I'm doing really well, thank you. Getting revved up and excited for the big MIPCOM ahead.
I bet. This is kind of our 6-monthly chat, isn't it? And it's always look forward to catching up in the world of MIPCOM and MIP TV and everything that's going on in Cannes. I guess, a good place to pick up really is our last conversation at MIP TV. And I said, how's MIPCOM looking for this year when, cast our minds back to April. And you said, yeah, it's going to be a big one. It's going to be back. So, how's it looking? Give us a bit of an idea of, what to expect in the first proper MIPCOM post-pandemic.
Okay, yeah, I do remember saying that. And it was true, we came out of MIP TV with a definite feeling of many people who had FOMO and was kind of beginning to really realize that getting back to a in-person, truly proper event in Cannes was a reality. So, and we were right. So what's really been happening is MIPCOM Cannes is definitely going to be back with its first full strength market since the pandemic. It's really going to be what we're calling a supersized MIPCOM, the mother of all entertainment content markets, as we like to call it. It's really, I'd say it's supersized because the TV industry's, major global studios and platforms and groups are all back in force, which was what we were all hoping for. Also for us, we're launching a major new space, which is the Seaview Producers Hub, dedicated to the creative and production communities. And of course, we're staging another, agenda-defining program for the industry. So I think it really is going to prove itself as the most anticipated week in the global TV industry calendar. That's what we're really excited about.
I'm not surprised. I mean, just having been at Edinburgh a few weeks ago, and that was sort of the first back to normal Edinburgh since the pandemic. There was some real energy in the room and late at night, and everybody felt like things were back to normal again. And looking at the floor plan, because that's always gives you a bit of a clue about, what sort of scale the event's going to be. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at the floor plan now. I suspect it's maybe still not finished, maybe, but... Yeah. But looking at it, you can see the number of outdoor structures that are going to be in place at MIPCOM. It's always a bit of a giveaway in terms of how busy it's going to be. And I can see there's 4 big structures on the beach there, but also there's a lot of smaller structures that are a little bit closer to the Croisette that we haven't seen for a little while. Talk us through that.
Sure. The big global players who've been outside on the beach before are back. You have an advance on me there, Justin. I haven't actually got the plan in front of me, but I do know it pretty well.
So we've got Fremantle, we've got
Paramount,
we've got E1, we've got A&E, and Warner's, of course.
Of course, the big, Warner Discovery on
there.
The majestic beach, absolutely. And then we have the new sands outside the Palais on the Croisette. There's a new Turkish group, which is MIPCOM, which is a new company for us this year at MIPCOM. Samsung have taken an outside space, which is really interesting for the first time. And the new Fox Entertainment, the new Fox, which brings together Fox Alternative Entertainment and Tubi and Mar Vista, the studio. So that's exciting. And then, of course, there are the stands that have been in place before with Banijay right out front, who are actually taking a two-level, a double-decker stand this year. And ITV Studios will, of course, also be outside in front of the Palais. So, yeah, the whole footprint has really just spread out again. And also the newly branded Endeavour content. So 5th season out to the right of the Palais, and the Gare Maritime is also back in Cannes.
Back with the super yachts over the other side of the Palais. That's right. And,
The super yachts.
and we're seeing BBC Studios back for first time. Now, is that going to be with their huge structure that was outside the Palais again? Is that the original structure that they had a few years ago?
No, BBC Studios have taken a different exhibition space inside the Palais, but taking over a whole beautiful wing on the front with the glass windows overlooking the front of the Palais. So that's going to be a brand new space that everyone will be able to discover. No, BBC Studios are back with a very beautiful way of taking part this year. So we're really looking forward to that.
And in terms of the Palais, we've got at least 4 floors, haven't we, open in the Palais?
Absolutely. It's basically back to a normal MIPCOM floor plan because Palais -1 level is open again, and we have all the floors of the Palais will have exhibition space. We have the Amazon-owned MGM up in taking a new stand in front of the Debussy Theatre. Canal Plus are back where they used to be, up on level 1 as well. And all of the Riviera 7 and Riviera 8 halls are fully booked and, are going to be at full strength.
Wow, it's going to be buzzing. I get the impression that it's going to be buzzing there. Now, I'm also looking at the new co-production and producers market area, which is a new area for MIPCOM, isn't it? And actually, I was looking at the floor plan. I was trying to work out, where it was. And actually, it's basically on the roof, isn't it? On the roof of Riviera 7 and 8, just after the bridge. And tell us about what that's going to be. Is that going to be a large covered outdoor area? Yeah,
no, absolutely. It's a new big tent structure on as you said, it's the roof. It's what we used to call Riviera 9. So it's between sort of the Palais and the Riviera halls. We know MIPCOM's always been more than a distribution market, and, that's never been more the point than today. And it's where co-production partnerships are formed. And we really felt that there was a need to actually give this area a specific destination, a home, and really create a 1,000 square meter producers hub, which will be a mix of meeting areas, networking spaces, and of course, a dedicated program where delegates can really, hear directly from the key, some of the key players in co-production and take sort of deep dives into all of the opportunities around the different genres, the trends, the regions and platforms and companies. So I think it's going to be a very, dynamic area, allowing producers to really go and talk about how do they find funding partners for their projects and new series. And I think it's something that, we've definitely had a lot of interest from clients about this. And I think it's something that we needed to do. We had at MIPCOM, we created I think it must have been about 4 years ago, we'd created a producers funding forum. And this has kind of developed on that initiative and just really brought it in also as a physical destination, giving a space for, producers to find the right people to meet with. So, we're really looking forward to seeing how that shapes up.
And that conference program that's actually dedicated in the Producers Hub, that's running alongside the other conference agendas, which is going to be happening in the main hall. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have the program will run for, from sort of 9 till 5 on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then a kind of wrap up on the Thursday. But it's a mix of some curated networking roundtable sessions and then some actual, speakers with panels. And then in parallel, there'll be the program in the Palais de Festival.
So back to exhibitors then. We sort of touched on who's coming into specifically and in the outdoor spaces there. But what everybody always asks, and I think I may have asked you this like a year ago, Lucy, when we were talking about MIPCOM or the first MIPCOM, I wouldn't say post-pandemic, it was actually during the pandemic, depending on where you were in the world. Which are the countries that are coming back in force then that we haven't seen for a few years?
Right. Well, and as you say, let's hope we are talking about this being post-pandemic now. If we look, obviously, at last year, we were seeing a lot of the European territories and some of the UK back, but now, for sure, the UK is back fully in a very big way. And internationally, obviously, the US, we talked a bit about some of the, all of the studios being back. There's also the Latin American market is back, Canada, most of Asia. Obviously, China still has a lot of travel restrictions, so will not be having a physical Chinese presence. But all of the other territories are back in pretty back to 2019 sort of way. So that's extremely positive. And then also there's the international pavilions, which have always had a great presence at MIPCOM. I think we're around 24 international pavilions coming as far-flung as Argentina and Australia, Canada, Colombia, India, who've actually kind of are growing their presence. And we're working a lot with the Indian pavilion to create some sessions around opportunities in India as well, South Korea, Turkey, Ukraine. We're very pleased, obviously, as we did last MIPTV. We were very pleased to have a Ukrainian national pavilion, which we offered to the Ukrainian industry, and that we're doing again at MIPCOM. And they'll also be presenting a showcase of their content in the Producers Hub this time around.
It sounds like people are coming back in a big way. Looking at some figures here, and it's saying around 300 exhibitors. I know you probably don't like the name of it, but I always call it the bunker. Everyone calls it the bunker fondly, I think.
Fondly, yes.
Yeah. So we're going to see that pretty much full, are we, down there with that many exhibitors?
As we fondly call it, the bunker, is probably about, 3/4 full. A lot of stands are there, but as I said, there are some pavilions like China and obviously Russia who are not there. But we also have some meeting areas where we have participants. There's always a lot of need for participants to be able to have their meetings in the Palais. And we know that, I hear it myself, we don't know where to have meetings. So people tend to go out and let's go over the road to the cafes. We've really making a focus of making sure that everyone's aware that there is a lot of meeting space that we make available. It's in the -1 area, but it's, all perfectly catered to and great seating areas. So there's both a buyer's area and a MIPCOM club overall and MIPCOM lounge where people can go and have their meetings. So those are all in the -1 area too. So I think, what you'll see is that it's kind of like the big global players are there. Then there's the rest of the exhibitors coming really from all around the world. So throughout the -1 and then up into the other halls, we're really seeing extremely busy, vibrant exhibition floor. The spaces are pretty filled out.
And you mentioned about different countries. You said India is expanding its presence. Are there any other countries that you've seen who are making more of an effort to come coming in bigger numbers than there were prior to the pandemic? Do you see any trends coming through in terms of particular territories or businesses really upping their presence?
We're seeing quite a lot of activity coming from the Middle East. We've got a more active participation from the United Arab Emirates, I know we have an Abu Dhabi Film Commission stand. We actually have a pavilion from Iran, which is a new participant. So I think the Middle East, there's more activity. There's also, we've seen a couple of new exhibitors coming out of Turkey, which I think I mentioned. There's MIPCOM, but there's a couple of others. But otherwise, there's new companies. There's around 50 new exhibitors this year, which is, it's quite a high number. But there are really a lot of different new companies coming from all over. A lot of some have been smaller, small companies that have been started up by executives potentially, having left bigger groups and have now sort of ready to take exhibition space, but it's very kind of spread out across many different territories. There's not like a one major trend that we've seen in terms of those new participants, other than those I just mentioned.
I was expecting fast channels to be quite a big topic, and I know that's going to be represented when it comes to some of the conference activity as well. I'd imagine there's probably lots of new fast players coming, aren't there, that maybe specific territories or specific genres. Are we going to be seeing a lot more of those on the ground in Cannes? Well,
I think there's a lot of our existing companies who come to MIPCOM who are, launching their own fast channels. There's a lot of that activity for sure. We do have a track of sessions focusing on fast channels. And we have speakers coming from, just to give some examples, from Roku, from Chicken Soup for the Soul, from A&E. In terms of the exhibitors, I guess, FilmRise have got a stand this year, Samsung, I mean, I think there are some exhibitors that are, involved in fast channels, but it's more in the conference sessions that will really be going kind of, doing a deep dive and really going in depth into that. And then it's, as I said, it's a lot of the companies who are already part of MIPCOM, who are also launching a lot of fast channels. It's certainly a big trend that's going on at MIPCOM.
Yeah, that's right. I've seen recently the Cineflick are really leaning into it, and Blue Ant and various other distribution businesses, which are perhaps unsurprisingly. We shouldn't forget talking about MIP Junior, of course, and MIP Junior's back as well, but it's going to be back in its original home, or the last place we saw it, which was down at the Marriott. Absolutely,
and it's actually the 30th MIP Junior, which is kind of cool. And it's back in the Marriott, which has been refurbished, so probably a slightly new configuration, but there will still be the usual, ingredients that make it what it is. So there'll be the screenings library, a physical screenings library that we've not had at the show since 2019, so that feels like quite a while ago. There'll be the, obviously a dedicated conference program to really go in depth into the kids industry. There'll be project pitches. So there's a couple of pitches, one on the under 11s and the other on tween content. There's also a keynote by Cecilia Persson, who's the managing director of BBC Studios Kids and Family, who will be talking about how she's looking for, new fresh ideas and new international partners. We have a world premiere coming from a Canadian company, Sinking Ship, called Phoenix Rising. It's actually kind of cool. It's really kind of takes its cues from the Breakfast Club. So it's looking at a group of teens excluded from education and their experience. And that's going to be on BBC iPlayer. And then there's also, Closing Night Party, which is with NBC Universal Kids and Family, networking events. And it's going to be, we're expecting around 900 participants right now, which is great. I think the kids community really do like those moments when they can come together. MIP Junior really is that, it gives that moment in the calendar.
So coming back finally and looking at MIPCOM as a whole, you're expecting in the region of what, about 10,000 delegates when all's said and done?
That's absolutely right. We're expecting around 10,000 delegates from, not far off, 100 countries. It really is back to the global markets.
Talk to us about the keynotes then, Lucy. Tell us about, what are the highlights? Because I think BBC are going to be having quite a big presence, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So BBC, we've introduced a new award called the Studio of Distinction. So it's being awarded to BBC Studios. And we're very, very pleased that both Tim Davie, BBC's Director General, and Tom Fussell, the CEO of BBC Studios, will both be present to receive the award, and it's the first time they'll give a joint address. And we've created this really to kind of mark the landmark achievement by a global studio, to celebrate, their achievements, but also to look forward to the future. And I think the BBC, which we've really seen recently, continues to really, reinvent and adapt itself, and it's really as relevant as ever. But not only in the UK, but I think globally as an example as to what the role of public service broadcasting is internationally. So, BBC Studios has this at MIPCOM. And then, as I'd said, so at MIP Junior, we also have Cecilia speaking. So I think it's going to be a very strong presence for BBC. And we're really very delighted to be able to do that.
It's timely as well. I was speaking to Chris Curtis, the editor of Broadcast, last week, and we were talking, this was pre the Queen's funeral, obviously, and saying, how important it was for the BBC to produce the sort of broadcast that it's famed for. And I think, I've got to say, through all of the 10 days of mourning and also this extraordinary outside broadcast that we saw around the procession and the Queen's funeral was remarkable. And it really was the best of the BBC, in terms of a technical achievement and the tone and everything. It was really superb. It'd be good to see the studios business out in Cannes, and we'll look forward to hearing from Tim Davie. I'm sure there's going to be some really fascinating feedback from him.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. I couldn't agree more. I think the coverage over the last couple of weeks has been absolutely incredible.
Lucy, well, I'll let you go and make all those last-minute plans. Well, it's not that last minute, is it? How long we've got? We've got about a month, haven't we?
Well, a bit less. We're kind of this time in, we're only like 3.5 weeks away, I think, roughly. So, the time is kind of running out very quickly. So, we're feeling like we're getting closer. We are getting closer by the day.
It'll be great to see everybody back together again. Perhaps some faces that we haven't seen for 3 years or so. So that's going to be fantastic. Fingers crossed for good weather.
Yes.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us. And I'll see you on the Croisette.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Justin. And we'll look forward to welcoming you back to Cannes for MIPCOM.
My next guest on this week's show is Lucas Green, Global Head of Content Operations at one of the world's biggest content producers, Banijay. Welcome to the show, Lucas. How are you doing?
I'm great, thanks, Justin. Thanks for having me on the pod. Really happy to be here.
Really glad that you could spare the time as well. And with a job title like Global Head of Content Operations at the biggest content producer in the world, it sounds like a pretty wide-ranging and big role you've got. I mean, tell us a little bit about that role and what you do at Banijay.
It's quite scary when you put it like that, isn't it? I try not to think about it too much, never get any sleep. I mean, I think actually, in fact, one of the key features of it is that we don't get that much sleep because there's always somebody producing one of those formats somewhere in the world. And there are often days where you wake up with Australia and then you do a full day with Europe and then you go to bed with another meeting with Australia or LA. So it is busy, I won't lie, but that's a great thing. And we really enjoy working on these formats. I suppose in a nutshell, it's a bit like creative air traffic control across our unscripted format. So I look after all of the existing formats that the group owns and produces in its footprint of 23 different territories, and then work closely with Banijay Rights, who do our distribution outside that footprint. And I think we were very proud of the fact that we had 295 different unscripted formats in active production last year, which put us top of the tree on K7's Tracking the Giants survey. But of those 295, there are obviously some real juggernauts and there's some exciting new ones coming through. And of course, like children, we love all of our formats equally, but we love some slightly more than others, which is, I suppose, when you look at the big ones, they are Survivor, MasterChef, Big Brother, Deal or No Deal, some of those really big reality shows, which have had actually a really healthy couple of years, as I think global networks and broadcasters have really doubled down on reality. And I think that has been, great news for some of our catalogue. And at Banijay, we really do value our people and our talent, but also our IP. So anyone who's ever worked with Banijay knows that we're fiercely protective of those formats because they are a producer's friend. And I think when you've got a hit format, it can make your life a lot easier, whether you're a broadcaster or a producer, because you can lean into all of that experience and history of making the show and hopefully sometimes learn from the mistakes of some of your predecessors and make just the best show you possibly can. So we do love a good format.
Yeah, well, clearly. Let's focus on the major juggernauts, as you put it. So you're overseeing both Big Brother and MasterChef and Survivor. Now, let's take Survivor. We're going to talk a little bit about Survivor, and that's another one of your formats that has recently sort of seen a resurgence and been rebooted. It's one of the world's biggest formats. I'd like to sort of delve into Survivor a little bit. Can you give us a bit of a potted history of this format? Because I'm trying to understand, why a format that's, the age that it is now getting that reboot and that resurgence. But take us back to the beginning of the format and give us an idea of where it all started.
Well, it's great timing, Justin, because this month it is 25 years young. So it's celebrating its silver jubilee. And 25 years ago, it launched in Sweden as Expedition Robinson. It was originally created by Charlie Parsons, produced by Castaway and ordered by SVT. And it did incredibly well in Sweden. And most TV viewers in Sweden still remember that moment when it launched, and it had an immediate impact and it began to very quickly travel the world. And I think it was around the turn of the millennium where reality shows were really ripping up the rule book and creating this brand new genre. And it's no coincidence that Big Brother, also in our catalogue, came around at a very similar time. And actually, they reinvented the world of reality, and I think set the bar, which is still produced at a very high level. I think it's a very long story since then, and it's been produced now in 50 territories, and we've had over 5,000 different survivors take part in the show over those 25 years. We still produce it in 21 different territories this year alone. So whilst it's made headlines in the UK, in all of that time, it's been a huge show around the world over those 25 years. It's the gift that keeps on giving for lots of our clients. And there's a huge fan community of Survivor 2. I think also important to say that, we couldn't have done that without the people who are on site and producing it. And as the air traffic control in Banijay, we ensure that these formats are produced to a high level and able to tap in all of that expertise that we have. And we will do approvals if different territories want to make changes or adapt it or do different versions of the show. But ultimately, it's those producers who are working incredibly hard to cast the shows, produce the shows, build the storylines, work hard in the edit to create these brilliant narratives. So I think it's quite nice to sort of sit here with you guys and take the credit for its success. But really, we try and stay in the background and let the local producers produce the local version, which is going to work best for their demographic and have that localized flavor within a big global brand.
So going back to that first production, you say it was SVT that originally commissioned this. So where was that show set? Was that show set in, a tropical environment, or was it sort of on the Swedish archipelago? What was the secret of that show and that broadcast that set all of this in train?
I think, it's always been an exotic show. It's called Survive. It's a brilliant name. It was first there on the market. Land grabbed that title. And actually, it's a genius format because it creates natural drama. It's an elimination show. To those who don't know Survivor so well, actually don't be misled that it's not really a Bear Grylls survival show. This isn't just about kill it, cook it, eat it, and find something and to eat and build a bivouac. It's actually very much a social game, and it's the last one standing. So yes, it always works best in exotic locations, which is far away from the madding crowd. It's back to basics. It's under a hot sun. It's on a beach. It's tropical locations work best. We produced it in hundreds of different places around the world. So it doesn't have to be in one specific place. It's not about that precise location, but I think it's stripping away the luxuries of modern life and then putting that diverse group of people into a melting pot of a social game. And actually, that is the key to it. It's the fact that they begin as two tribes, they eliminate people from their tribe, and then they come together. And that drives the drama of you've got to work together, but ultimately at each tribal council, you've got to nominate who's going to leave. And it's a whittle. So it is a game. It is outwit, outlast, outplay. It's the last person standing, and you've got to have whatever it takes to win that show. And whether it's what you bring physically in terms of the challenges, whether it's the alliances that you make, whether it's the friendships you make, whether it's you've got the best strategy. It's quite a psychological game as well in terms of how you go about trying to win. And of course, it's got a cash prize. So it's got all of the great beats of a reality, which is it's got jeopardy, it's got great stories, it's got human drama, and there's a real purpose to it at the end. It's about winning the prize. And I think, interestingly, a lot of copycat shows over the years have had to avoid infringing Survivor, and they don't quite deliver, because if you haven't got that very simple mechanism driving it, sometimes they don't have enough jeopardy. Sometimes they're trying too hard to be different. And actually, we love Survivor because it's the original, and therefore it's the simplest, and for many reasons it's the best.
It's really interesting what you're talking through, those format beats, as you put it. Andy Fry, fantastic journalist who writes some features on the TellyCast website. He recently wrote a piece about the non-scripted format trends that seem to be sort of breaking through right now. And it came through with a few of those. And I was just sort of looking at his piece while you were speaking. And it sounds like one of the keys to Survivor's success, which you didn't mention, but you did in a way, is actually strategy. There's a real strategic element in play here when it's about the ultimate survivor coming through these eliminations and what have you. Do you think that's the real edge, the strategic edge?
I think so. Yeah, it's about gameplay, and it's different from the other genres of shows. It's not about dating. There's quite a saturation of reality dating shows out there at the moment, and you have to be drop dead gorgeous. You have to look like a supermodel to take part, and you have to be single. Whereas Survivor can cast from a very diverse group of people, much like Big Brother. It can be a real cross section of society, which allows it to stay fresh and topical. So you cast according to what different social movements are going on in your country right now. And so you can have the best people rather than just the best looking people. And then as you put those different personalities together and you then set the game in motion, yes, absolutely. It's about strategy, and different people have different strategies to win. Some want to be the most popular. Some want to be the most cunning. Some think that they can outwit the opposition, and some think they can do it through teamwork. So much like life, everyone is different, and I think every single game of Survivor plays out slightly differently as a result. I thought what you were going to say that I'd missed out is that it's kind of its filmic quality. What I don't know whether Andy talked about this. I must read his article. It sounds very good. It sounds like good homework. I think we've seen this big rise in unscripted thrillers. So they're unscripted formats, but it feels like you're watching a movie. The landscape, the setting, very visual and spectacular. And so it has a lot of the same elements of watching a big scripted series, but of course, they are much more cost efficient and quick to make. Even a show as big as Survivor, it's going to take us over a year to produce the new series for the BBC, and it's been in development for a long time. But actually, that's still significantly faster than if you're doing an enormous scripted launch. And so I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of these shows now look, they're filmed in a brilliant way. The quality of the cameras and the lenses have improved, and with drones, I think that a lot of producers are now able to create these unscripted thrillers, which you can sit and you can enjoy as a box set and really binge through. And I think, again, this will hopefully do a brilliant job for BBC iPlayer, as well as being in a scheduled primetime slot, because it's a sort of show that you can consume in a week, and you can absolutely watch 2 or 3 or 4 back to back, because the story just keeps driving it, rather than it feel like a very much, a weekly episode that you're going to come back to in the schedules.
Post-pandemic, we've seen, a huge number of format reboots being commissioned, obviously, and I would imagine Banijay has been the recipient of many of those. But why do you think that is? Why now is it that Big Brother is getting recommissioned, and Survivor and lots of other formats across your catalogue and many of your competitors? Why is that the case? Because we've been through a period of a couple of years when we were all locked down, probably unable to shoot many of these types of shows. Is it a business reason in the way that sort of Banijay now is really hitting its stride, coming together after Endemol Shine acquisition? Is it now that the company's really starting to get up to speed in terms of exploiting these formats? Or is it more of a demand coming from broadcasters and audiences that they want to see these sort of familiar shows?
I think there are a number of reasons. I think that, firstly, you can't uninvent a good idea. And actually a show like Big Brother coming back to ITV and Survivor in the BBC, they've always been good ideas, and they've never really gone away. We just haven't seen them in production in the UK for a while. And actually outside the UK, these have had very strong productions all around the world. What Banijay has been able to do, yes, as we've integrated post-Endemol Shine acquisition, we've really come together to look at these formats and share that expertise. And I think there is a pandemic-related issue there, which is that these big brands that have got 25 years of you should see the Bible for Survivor. There's a lot in there. All of those different iterations, whether you want to do the live one, the strip one, the high-budget one, the scaled-down one, it's all in there, and actually you can tap into that expertise and you can lean into that knowledge, and all the different locations around the world and all of the different beaches and local fixers and flying producers that we've got that can go out there and help you launch Survivor. It de-risks your production, because you're not having to make those mistakes from the outset, because you know that there is a format Bible you can look at for all of the games and all of the challenges and all of that knowledge. And we've got that continuity within Banijay in order to be able to share that and streamline that. So you've got all of that support in the back office that we give. So I think they sound like they're quite big, expensive, risky commissions, but actually you're de-risking it because you've got that knowledge and that those different experiences to choose from. So that provides extra value. I think in terms of the market, I think that we've been quite savvy to ensure that we've got a very diverse portfolio of formats. I think our senior management team, when they went out and acquired different companies over the year, they looked at where there might be gaps in the catalogue, and they acquired Survivor 5 or 6 years ago, and they acquired Castaway and bought it from Charlie Parsons. They could see that there was this appetite for big adventure reality, and we did the same with Temptation Island, and then of course with Endemol Shine comes Big Brother. So we could absolutely see that the changes in viewing habits were pushing us much more towards reality and unscripted, and we really saw the value in unscripted reality when actually maybe other studios were really doubling down on scripted. So I think it was quite good long-term planning from Banijay, but I think also there is a real benefit to broadcasters that these shows which have existing track record and experiences in other productions gives value to both sides.
Fairly recently up at Edinburgh, and I know you were up at Edinburgh, Lucas, and one of the headlines that came out of Edinburgh was Ian Katz talking about, and I think his quote was actually reading from Deadline now, he said, there is something depressing about the number of UK reboots, even though obviously Channel 4 are rebooting a number of their own formats as well. Clearly you won't agree with that, but do you think that reboots make it tougher for new formats to break through? Because surely that's, as you mentioned 200 and how many formats that you're currently managing. Obviously, priority is what brings the most money in, but the rebooting of something like Survivor for a broadcaster will also impact on some of the other formats. You've got some of the newer formats that you might be thinking, well, maybe, this could be a 25-year format in the offing, but actually, you're having your own formats competing against each other for commissions. I mean, how do you manage that? What's the strategy behind deciding, which formats you really want to push and which, you're happy to sort of build on their legacy?
We'll put it this way. I think you've got to have a diverse portfolio of formats in any schedule or in any development slate. And I think they all do different jobs for you. And I think the beauty of something like Big Brother or Survivor is it can provide volume and it can do some of the heavy lifting in terms of attracting the right demographic. And I think that having a big commercially successful show then allows you to take risks in other areas. You wouldn't want to throw 11 unblooded youth team players into the starting 11 of Man City. Whereas actually, if you've got a big star like Erling Haaland, who is going to score a hatful of goals, it allows you to take risks in other positions. And I think that's why you need that mixed culture of shows. And so we would very much defend those. And we have lots of new IP coming through at Banijay as well. We split it equally in terms of the time that we divide in terms of launching new shows, because we know we have to have more content coming through the pipeline. You have to have a long-term view on these. And some of those big super brands will ebb and flow. You need to have a long-term strategy, which we do. So absolutely appreciate that you can't just have super brands. You've got to have a mixed economy. We're very proud of some of the new IP that we've got coming through too. I think in relation to Ian Katz's point about Big Brother, in some ways, I would agree that Big Brother launching on ITV2 and ITVX is actually a much better home for it now than Channel 4, because it's going to do a very specific job. And I think that slot, in terms of driving reality to their platform, and of course Survivor will also do the same for iPlayer, it's fulfilling a very different role. So I think in some ways it's horses for courses, and having those big brands that can play a very specific role will hopefully bring more viewers, will deliver commercially for ITVX, and it will allow them to then be more experimental. One final thing I would say in those shows' defense is it's a really good way to launch and develop off-screen talent. And if you've got a big show like that that's got room to carry junior researchers and junior camera crew and junior production management, these are the places that we all learn our craft. And I think lots of people working in the industry now came through on Big Brother the first time round, or they learned their trade on the Big Breakfast. I mean, I learned my trade, working on B. Graham Norton every night. And when you get to work on a big show that is delivering content night after night after night, you can really take risks and you can experiment and you can learn so much more from working on a big show with lots of volume than a small show which can't obviously afford to take risks on more junior members of staff. So I think they've also got a training role in terms of helping bring talent through the business.
Looking back at the Survivor brand then, so it's 25 years, you say, and I know you said, the size of the Bible is incredibly impressive when it comes to remaking the show, but has it changed at all over those 25 years? I mean, certainly I know when it comes to Big Brother, there's always been tweaks along the way and there's always been sort of changes in format. If there have been any changes, how did you decide how far to go with those changes? Because obviously you don't want to break the secret of success that's generated such a successful format. How do you know how much to change or not?
I think a lot of it is down to the instinct of, the brilliant producers who've always worked on it. And somebody like Julia Dick, who has been a flying producer on Big Brother since the beginning, know instinctively what is a core theme of Survivor that you shouldn't deviate from. And I think those values are always at the heart of the show. So I think we've got the central principles behind it, but a lot of it comes down to localization. And if this is right for the territory and if it feels relevant and if it's, in keeping with those core guiding values of the format, then absolutely, we welcome that flexibility. And I think that's also a secret of another show that we've produced for a long time, which is MasterChef, that actually by not being incredibly rigid about what the format should always be, as long as it remains true to the values, we're happy to scale it up and scale it down for your territory. So, for example, we fiercely protective of the tribal council, and that shouldn't have lots of, unnecessary branding all over it. Those sort of key pillars of the show. The casting is always important that we don't, cheapen it. And the core of the show is what are the features of those survivors who take part. I think you only need to look at Italy and Spain, where it's done live, it's got live episodes, it's stripped. It's very different from Australia and the US, where it's spent lots of time in the edit crafting the show. So there are absolutely lots of room within the format for adaptation. And I think the key to a format being able to travel around the world is the ability to give it scale. We all know that one of the reasons why a lot of programs don't travel is they're perceived as too expensive for a local market. And I think the key there is to work out how can you maintain the look and feel of the show, but you can go to different locations which aren't as expensive as a Fijian tropical island. And it was interesting that in the pandemic, actually, to keep the show on air in the Nordics, we did do some domestic versions in Scandinavia because it was obviously much easier to travel locally. And again, we worked hard to make sure the core themes of Survivor were still true to the show. But absolutely, it still works depending which remote location you can be in. We just know that viewers like sunny beaches and blue skies. So that's where we always go if we can.
Now, I know you won't be able to tell me much, if anything, about the BBC reboot that's coming relatively soon. Well, actually, when is it coming? Do we have a date yet, or even a quarter?
It will be next year. It's in pre-production already, but it will be later next year. At the BBC's discretion to announce when it's coming out, but it'll be later in the year in 2023.
Right. Okay. And I'm imagining that the BBC version of this is going to be on the sort of upper end of the production values and the filmic sort of nature of it. It's going to look great, right? If it's the BBC's going to be putting this on prime time. Absolutely.
We're spending taxpayers' money, so we want to make sure we give everyone good value. So we will absolutely work really hard to do that. The important thing to mention is that the team who are going to be making this absolutely know this field like the back of their hand. So Natalka Zanak, Claire O'Donoghue, but also Stephen Lovelott, the team of executive producers who've worked really hard to develop this and sell it to the BBC are going to deliver it. And I think we know that they're trusted to deliver really high-end reality. They're going to put that money on screen. And I think viewers and hopefully the BBC will be really pleased with the end result, because those guys are absolutely at the top of their game when it comes to these kind of shows. And I think that was a big part of the sale. I think, it's been really exciting over the last year or so to see those Banijay UK companies have a new lease of life. And I think that the integration is now very much complete. And I think we've seen them really start to fire on full cylinders. And I think the return of both Big Brother and Survivor simultaneously is a real testament to that, and the team at Banijay UK who've really been delivering.
We spoke to Lucy from RX Global about MIPCOM, which is coming up in the not too distant future. I'm presuming that we're going to see Banijay there and a big focus on Survivor as well in Cannes.
Well, if Edinburgh is anything to go by, I think that MIP is going to be a biggie this year. I think that it was really good atmosphere in Edinburgh as people were able to come back together. They'd really missed it, and they'd missed being with people face to face and seeing that TV community come back together. And I think that MIP will be the same, but on a much bigger scale. So I think we're all looking forward to it. I totally agree with Lucy, and I'm really happy to be going back. I think that the community has needed it. I think it's great for people to get back together, and I think it's going to be a real shot in the arm for people to go down there. It's going to be busy. We know that a lot of people are coming, and we've got lots of great meetings lined up. We've got some real treats in store for our producers and our clients, and it'd be great. There's nothing like a pitch in the room. We've all had to pitch on Zoom and Blue Jeans, and even pitched on Amazon Chime, which was a first. But you can't be a face-to-face pitch. And actually, you can look somebody on, you can see straight away whether they're into it, and you get more energy back. You can really feed off people in the room, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Lucas, it's time for Story of the Week, where my guests get to choose the TV industry story that's caught their eye in the past 7 days. What's your story of the week?
For the last couple of weeks, there has only been one story, hasn't there? And that's Her Majesty, the Queen Elizabeth. What I would like to look at and talk about with you is the Queen's impact on the TV industry. Because, obviously it's not been the most important element of the story, but I think it's one that we can all muse over and actually think about how she's affected all of our lives, but specifically in the TV industry. And actually, I think she really did have quite a big impact on the British TV industry and helped to create this very special and unique, very creative, very fertile, world-class British TV industry.
When she started her reign, TV was a very different beast than it is now. And obviously, the whole concept of being royal, back when the TV industry was, post-war in the 50s and 60s, it was more about, what they don't like to share. But that's certainly changed, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I was a historian at university before I turned my arm to TV. So I always like to try and see through the perspective of the past and what it can teach us about the future. And the very element at the beginning of the Queen's reign in 1953 was the reason why most British families went out and bought a TV set, because they wanted to watch the coronation. So the coronation was in colour. It was obviously that was the first time it had been televised, but it was the trigger that led to mass household consumption of TV sets rather than people just listening to the wireless. So that created this infrastructure, a bit like, we now have an infrastructure of broadband and streaming. The wireless broadband network has allowed streaming to take place. And actually, the Queen's coronation, prompting everyone to have a TV set in their living room, set the right landscape for the BBC and then later ITV to become the driving force of entertainment in people's lives at home. So I think that made it possible. And then the fact that I think the way that the Queen interacted with the press is really interesting to look at, because we know that by the late 60s, she was thinking about how she could modernise and come into people's lives. And they made this quite controversial at the time documentary called Royal Family. It was made in 1969. And she let the cameras follow her and her quite young family at the time round for a year. And it's interesting that Princess Anne actually said she really hated the idea and really didn't like it at the time and found it really annoying. But it was the first time that cameras actually filmed them as a family talking to each other rather than talking to the people. So this was much, much more than just having a televised Queen's speech. And if we look back, you could say that this was the birth of the reality show. Rather than just sitcoms and game shows and dramas and news, it was actually entertainment based around just watching a family life. and it was hugely popular and people wanted to see it. And then not long afterwards, we started to see things like The Family and An American Family in the US. Again, the first time that people were just documenting real life and editing it into a story. The Real World followed from John Murray and MTV. And it's not long after The Real World that Big Brother was born. And then, of course, that then set the tone for the modern world of reality television. But the royal family, when the Queen let the cameras into the palace in 1969 for a year, broke through that, and it created a mass demand for just watching everyday household life. She then balanced it. She was brilliant at knowing when to say stop. So it's quite remarkable that in 70 years of being a monarch, she never ever gave an interview. So she knew when to keep the audience wanting more, and she knew how to kind of protect her family when she wanted to. And I think we can all learn from that, in terms, whether you're a celebrity or whether you're producing a format, knowing when to keep the audience wanting more. And so she was able to preserve that brand in the right way. But I think all the way through to, the 2012 Olympic opening ceremony, where she dived out of the plane. Well, I think she dived out of the plane. I'm not sure whether it was her or stuntman. But, that, again, reinvented the gold standard for event television and at the Olympic opening ceremony. And then she came back and even did it this year with Paddington Bear. So I think it inspired people. We all look back and say for 70 years, she was probably the most famous person in the world. And yet she never gave a TV interview, and she knew when to use the media as the right levers to help her maintain that beautiful equilibrium of stability and power. Her interaction with the TV industry is something that actually also left a very indelible mark, not just on British society, but the whole world. And I think that's true of lots of parts of her reign, that she was the Queen of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and the Commonwealth, but, she had a global reach.
For UK listeners to TellyCast, I'm sure everybody will be aware that the Queen's speech is on Christmas Day, same time every year. And traditionally in the UK, perhaps less so in recent years, but it was a time for everyone to gather round. And actually the Christmas Day, was often organised around the Queen's speech and the time this Queen's speech was happening. And so that's going to be obviously a little bit different this year. It really is an end of an era. So let's see how things are going to go forward. And I'm sure her influence is going to remain in many, many of those areas.
I agree. And I think as reboots go, I think the King's speech on Christmas Day this year will be a surefire hit.
Lucas, now it's time to find out your hero of the week and who or what you want to tell to get in the bin. So first of all, who's your hero of the week?
So my hero of the week has been Hugh Edwards. I think that, Hugh had the biggest job in television over the last couple of weeks, and I think he absolutely delivered. I think at a time when people wanted a steady hand who they trusted, who they could empathise with, I think he got it absolutely spot on. I think right from the sad day that the Queen passed away on that Thursday, he was very measured. I don't think he put a foot wrong. I think it was what we all wanted in terms of the way he measured it. And I think right through to the funeral coverage, obviously that was such a huge event. And I think that the tone that the BBC struck was actually very good. And I think that is not an easy thing to get right. And I think, Hugh Edwards absolutely proved that he is the top of his game, and he's become, the master broadcaster in that scenario. And I think he did a brilliant job.
Yeah, he's really, you could probably say he's really taken on the mantle of David Dimbleby, had for many, many years in terms of royal broadcasts and major elections, and this sort of real key anchor at the centre of footage for the BBC, which, really held things together. I think Hugh Edwards now feels like he's ascended to that really senior broadcaster role.
Absolutely. I think, he's a broadcaster with a capital B. He's no longer just a newsreader or a newscaster. I think that he's got a very broad appeal. I think we trust him. We like him.
And how about who or what you're going to tell to get in the bin? Lucas, who's going in the bin this week?
Well, controversially, and I know it's quite early, but I'm going to tell Liz Truss to get in the bin.
Wow.
I don't think she's had a brilliant start. I think I'm going to give her a B-. And you know what? I think as we now enter a period of perhaps instability and a national identity crisis, we've had stability for 70 years, and I think Charles has made a very good, solid start, and people are warming to him, which is great. But I don't think that we can have an unelected Prime Minister with a mandate of 80,000 unelected Tory party members deciding who is our political leader in such a difficult period. I think it would have been the right thing to do to say, I need that mandate, I will call a general election. But, she seems determined to stagger on. And some of the early signs I don't think are good. I think, talking about getting rid of caps on bankers' bonuses, I think that, she is going to determine the fate of the BBC and Channel 4. They're not just great British institutions, but they are really important to the global TV industry in terms of, the new content that they help launch. And I think it's really important that the way that those two broadcasts are handled over the next couple of years is done right. And, if she goes out and has a general election and wins, then she's got the mandate to do that. But I think that must try better is Liz Truss's school report.
Well, she's certainly got a big job on her plate, I think. As you say, there's probably a little bit of feeling of insecurity, maybe, a little bit of change in the air. You have to be impressive, I think, to carry this role as Prime Minister off now, more than perhaps the last 2 or 3. But let's see.
And it needs authority. You need somebody who's got the belief and the trust of the nation. And I think if we've got somebody who's got a general election victory behind them, I think that also gives people confidence in the leadership. But I think at the moment they don't have that.
Yeah, all will be revealed, and there's is probably a tricky winter ahead for Liz Truss. But there she goes. The first time that the Prime Minister's got in the bin. I suspect there may be a few more, but who knows? Let's wait and see. Hopefully she'll do some amazing work that we'll all be very pleased with. Jury's going to be still very much out. Lucas, thanks so much for joining me this week. Really interesting to chat with you, and look forward to seeing you down on the Croisette in the not too distant future.
Yes, I look forward to it very much. It will be a pleasure, and let's hope the sun is shining on us and we can all enjoy an excellent market. And we look forward to seeing lots of friends and colleagues who we haven't seen in person from around the world back down there in the south of France. Lucky old us. We do work long hours, and it is a tough industry, but at the end of the day, it's a nice job, isn't it? We get to go and hang out in these swanky places and enjoy ourselves. I think we have to say thank you for all of that and appreciate that even on the long days, it's a very rewarding job. So we're lucky old souls.
Yeah, that's right. It's not a bad gig, is it?
I can think of worse. Being Prime Minister.
Yeah, there we are. Thanks, Lucas. We'll see you soon.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Well, that's about it for this week's show. We've just announced our next TellyCast event, the TellyCast Digital Content Forum, sponsored by BBC Studios. It's a unique new industry event created to explore the opportunities, trends and commerce in digital video. The speaker lineup reads like a who's who of the digital content community and includes top execs from Meta, Channel 4, Lad Studios, Jungle Creations, Audio Boom, Future Studios, UTA and BBC Studios, and many others. Plus, we have some incredible creators lined up for the event, including Joe Sugg and Danny Robbins, writer of the podcast turned TV show The Battersea Poltergeist. It takes place at the BFI South Bank in London on Thursday, November the 10th. Tickets are strictly limited and on sale now at telecast.com/events. And our early bird ticket promotion runs out at the end of the month, so move fast for the best ticket deals. We hope to see you there. TellyCast was edited by Ian Chambers and recorded in London. Until next week's show, as always, stay safe,